What is up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com. I'm Jacob Turner. Joining me, as he always does, it's our very own publisher, Andrew Jones. And AJ, we're here for another edition of the UNC Football Show, the FSU preview edition of the UNC Football Show, with Carolina set to travel down to Tallahassee this Saturday, 3:30 p.m. kickoff in Tallahassee. UNC currently a 2.5-point favorite, over under set at 50.5. And AJ, we'll talk about it a little bit later. We've got some other things to dive into before, but I know you said off camera a few minutes ago, you're like, I didn't pick FSU to win the league like a lot of people did, because I didn't have a lot of confidence, especially at the quarterback position. DJU obviously injured right now and not being the quarterback for them anyway, but this is another prime opportunity for Carolina to go get a win on the road, because FSU has just been the talking point of college football for all the wrong reasons this season. So we'll dive into some numbers on that a little bit later, because I think that'll illustrate just how poor, and probably from an FSU fan perspective, how extremely disappointing the Seminoles have been this season. But again, we've got some other things we want to dive into before that. And Carolina coming off a win over Virginia on the road, best performance of the season, probably the most complete performance of the season on both sides of the ball for North Carolina, and definitely the best performance of the season we saw from the defensive side of the ball. And AJ, that's where I want to start. That's where I want to start, because I think that's the talking point this week, is how did Carolina's defense go from being as bad as it has been at times this year for a majority of the season, to having this 10-sack, only holding Virginia to 14 points, less than 300 yards, just 77 at halftime. How does the switch flip after a bye week like it did? And I thought the Jeff Collins press conference this week was fascinating, not necessarily from what he said. I do like some of the stuff he said about putting high school tape together for the players and showing it to them to try to just get them to believe and see again that, hey, you guys are talented football players. I did like that aspect of it. But what I found the most interesting was, I think, the questions that you guys in the media were trying to get of, like, hey, like, what happened on Saturday? How have you guys been so bad at times this year, giving up 70 to JMU, and all of a sudden you have a game like this, and people are kind of sitting there like Twitter and the message boards were on Saturday, like, where the heck did this come from? So take me in that press conference room and some of the stuff that Jeff Collins said, because again, I thought it was an interesting interview, but I think the main talking point this week, and what we're going to try to dissect here, is it just as simple as K'Mon Rucker comes back and this defense healthy, and this defense is really good? Because I personally don't believe it can just be that simple. So
there are a lot of factors, and you mentioned the video clips. They showed the defensive players. They put together high school clips of each player on defense, and they showed them on Friday, and it was to remind them how fun football can be.
Yeah.
What happens when you're playing loose and free? Mm-hmm. And they hadn't been playing loose and free for a while. And the players said that really helped them a lot. We talked to Elijah Hudsey, played quarterback in high school. So they showed quarterback clips of him throwing a touchdown pass. And it was just, they had some fun with it. They were making fun of Bo Atkinson. They found JV clips when he was in ninth grade playing tight end. So a lot of it was to have fun, loosen them up. And I think that's a huge thing.
Yeah.
Anybody's played, you played competitive varsity soccer for 4 years. You understand, if you're not loose going into a game, you're playing with one arm tied behind your back.
You're thinking too much. Yeah.
And soccer be with the leg behind your back. But I think that was a big part of it. I also think, and I'm going to list some factors here, I think college football is about matchups. And I've learned that more the last few years than I realized previously. Part of it's because the access with the current staff under Mac, you just learn a lot more. You get to see a lot more. You have more conversations. And it's a little bit like when you look at the NCAA tournament, when the brackets come out and you think, oh, man, that's going to be a team that my team can handle. That's going to be a team that my team might struggle with because of matchups. College football is about matchups. How else people say, and you said this before we started recording, people were wondering, how does this team play so poorly on defense and then they go play so well against Virginia? Well, look at Nebraska. Nebraska got shredded humiliated by Indiana, and then they go to Ohio State the next week and have a chance to possibly win that game. Now, I think part of it's Indiana's a lot better than people want to give them credit for it because they're Indiana, but it's also matchups and it's college football. It's young people. Another factor is Kamen Rucker. You cannot deny that the number of eyeballs on him in pre-snap and the awareness on him in pre-snap frees up other guys. You're going to have to dedicate multiple blockers to Kamen Rucker. You have to. So it frees up other guys to do stuff. The fact that at halftime they had 6 sacks and it was by 6 different guys speaks to that. Mm-hmm. So, and the other thing too, and we could get into this a little bit more later, but I believe that this team had a lot of stuff lifted from itself during the bye week. And we'll get into that a little bit more later. It's tightly related. It's perspective related. All those things matter because football's real life. It really happens. So you have to deal with adversity on the football field like you do in real life. You have to process it properly. And if you don't, you screw up in real life just like you screw up in the football field. So I think a lot of things came to a head. And I also believe that one last thing I need to give Jeff Collins credit for is he told us that they did a day one reinstall during the bye week. And when I tweeted it out, he got slaughtered on social media for saying that. But people weren't looking at that with the right perspective because sometimes, and that's what bye weeks are for, it's for self-evaluation. Sometimes you got to go back and just kind of hit the restart on something. Sometimes you have to go back and pump air back. Instead of pumping air in your tire, you just got to go get a new tire.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what they did. And the players said it simplified everything. And it was another factor in relieving some of the stress. Even Elijah Huzzy and Amari Campbell yesterday both said that the day one reinstall was huge for them. Amari said it reminded him of some of the mistakes that he was starting to make more consistently. And then he scaled back and eliminated those mistakes in the game. He didn't make any of them in Charlottesville. And he was making them in prior games. So there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with going back to the basics sometimes. And that's all they did. And it worked because that was a phenomenal defensive performance. 7 yards rushing for Virginia.
29 carries.
Now there were 10 sacks in there for 67 yards, but still, if you remove the sacks and still look at the rushing, it was still not very good.
No.
So the ground game was not a part of Virginia's deal after a while. So, and they forced Calandria they forced him to get yanked.
Yeah. No, he's
their guy. They have totally sold into Anthony Calandria. Mm-hmm. Then here comes Tony Muskett, who beat the Tar Heels last year. Mm-hmm. They had a little bit of success, but Carolina was a little more of a softer defense at that point. So that's why.
Yeah.
They're a talented team. Mm-hmm. They're athletic. They've got a lot of players who are who the NFL teams have eyeballs on, and they finally stepped up, and all those things came to a head, and they played that way. Will they do it this week? Who knows? Yeah, but they did it last weekend, and I think that's the explanation for how it happened.
I just want to go back to this real quick. What were people? Why would people be upset about on social media about Jeff Collins doing a read? Like, what's the angle? I mean, first of all, color me shocked that people are upset about something on social media, but what I don't get why that would be such a bad thing when you look at how bad Carolina's been defensively this year. What was the negativity that you saw there?
Well, for people who want to see negativity, they can view that as low-hanging fruit. It's like, well, what do you mean? You're just starting all over again, and it's because you suck, and shouldn't you have done that in August, all that kind of stuff? Here's the reality, and I'll go ahead and put this out there. I find our threads on the message board, and we have a good message board. We don't have that many psychopaths on our message board.
No, we don't. We really don't.
Okay?
We really don't.
But the message board, when they lost to, was it Georgia Tech, was just wild. There were so many posts because it was easy for all the negative Nancys to just go crazy and destroy Mac and destroy Jeff and destroy certain players on defense. I found it fascinating that there were 132 posts in the game thread against Virginia, when typically there would be 500, 600, 700, 800.
Yeah.
And I also found it fascinating that on our Twitter feed, there weren't a ton of responses.
I noticed that too. I'm glad. I think we brought it up on 3 things too, but I noted it just felt like, oh, things are going really well right now.
So
So
people aren't happy. It's like people want them to go poorly.
Yeah,
so weird. They look because some people have made up their mind about Mac.
Yeah.
And they don't. And not enough people are thinking with full perspective. They're very reactionary. It's so much easier to just be pissed off when things don't go right and to be snarky. So people were going after Jeff for that reason without understanding that a lot of teams do that in their bye weeks anyway, especially when your bye week is so late in the year. Mm-hmm. You kind of have to go back and redo a few things. Like I'm sure the running backs were doing ball protection drills, more of that during the bye week than they do during the season. Mm-hmm. It's just different. And you have to go back and kind of redo. I know in basketball, they do a lot of that stuff. When you have the open week in basketball sometime in January, I know Roy's teams would go back to the basics for a couple of days because you got to redo that stuff. You got to go back over. You got to keep it fresh, maybe tweak something in there. So I thought it was interesting that a lot of the fans that are vociferous on social media were very quiet. And I can tell you that I talked to somebody around the program. They noticed it too.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And it was kind of laughter. And they have reached a point. This was part of that conversation. And maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here, but there's a lot of people that have made up their mind about Mac, and it doesn't matter what happens.
Yeah.
And I gave the example of when I covered the end of the Herb Sendek era in basketball at NC State, where Herb struggled for a while. There were some reasons I understood why NC State fans didn't like him, didn't like the way he played and all that stuff. But he finally started getting the program together and had a program. And they're pretty good. Mm-hmm. Those teams with Julius Hodge and Elian Evtimov and Ingen Etzer and all those guys, they were good basketball teams. And I covered them up into the Sweet 16 in Syracuse. Carolina was there as well in 2005. Those were good teams. But a lot of NC State fans had made their mind up about Herb and had been loud about it, and they weren't going to change their opinion, even though Herb had a pretty good thing going. And he was forced out even after having 5 straight trips to the NCAA tournament and having 5 or 6 wins in the NCAA tournament. And they forced him out. And then they couldn't find a coach. Took 34 days. They ended up with Sidney Lowe, who couldn't even talk to the team when he was hired because he had to go to finish his degree first. And it was a train wreck. And they got what they asked for, basically. Carolina fans have to be careful of the same thing. Because I think a lot of people have made up their mind about Mac, but I don't think there's a finished product just yet, simply because what if this season does close strong? The players talk about running the table.
I know.
They should win at FSU. Then they're open. They should beat Wake at home. Then they go to BC. BC's not that good. Castellanos can be bottled up. I don't think he's 100%. And then they're home against State.
Winnable.
It's completely reasonable to think that this team wins its next 4 and they're 8-4 at the end of the regular season. And I know this much, and I didn't mean to go in this direction so early in this show, but the last couple of years of Larry Fedora, all I heard from our subscribers and from Carolina fans, we just want to win 8 or 9 and beat State every once in a while. Well, the guy that's there is in position to say, I've done that. And it's funny how the negativity about absolutely everything, and I'm not defending Mac here. I'm playing right in the middle here because I get why people are upset. Trust me. And I could go 20 minutes on that too. I'm just sort of fascinated that people have made their absolute proclamations before the season's even over. And I know that the last 2 years with the collapses have played a role in that, and people are tired of saying that Mac's just a politician. He's not delivering on this and delivering on that. I get all that kind of stuff, but I do think it's fascinating that when they put together their best performance of the year, it's crickets, man. And that's not a good sign. It's not a good sign for Mac. That's not a good sign for the program, because to me, it means that a lot of people have crawled into the corner of apathy and they're not going to come out until there's a change.
Yeah, I get it. And again, like you said a second ago, you get why fans feel like that. And we're not going to rehash that conversation here necessarily, but I look at it like, just to provide some context on what you mean there, here's how I see it. And just to go back a little bit, James Madison game for me was, for a lot of people, and this is how I view it, for fans, was the straw that broke the camel's back.
I agree.
I think that was the end for a lot of people. And I get it when you look at how the last few years have ended, and there was already a lot of frustration and a little bit of apathy coming into the year a little bit. And then you go and do that, And I think that was the straw that broke the camel's back. I think the real issue that really, I think there was a couple worst case scenarios, unfortunately, for Mac Brown that happened after the fact, that you go to Duke and do what you did. And then you can kind of excuse it a little bit. Carolina was in that game for a little bit, kind of the same old story that we've seen a lot, where close game, tie game going to the fourth quarter, and then the defense gives up long drives and the game's over. But I think the Georgia Tech game too, of like, Georgia Tech is kind of actively trying to just get to overtime, and somehow you give up a 60-plus yard run and he doesn't get touched and the game's over. So you have these I look at those 3 games in particular this year and say, you just can't do what you did against James Madison. Mac Brown said the same thing in his press conference afterwards. Yeah. And then these other games happen after the fact where fans are just kind of like, you know what, man, I can't do it with this guy and this staff anymore. And I get that. I think the thing that I have a problem with is being a fan of other teams like I am. I'm a huge Manchester United fan. I'm always going to watch my team and always going to back my team and whoever the coach is. And we suck right now. Just fired our coach. But I think the problem with the Virginia performance is a lot of people, like you've mentioned, have already made up their mind. Yeah. So it doesn't matter what happens, or they go and have this great performance against Virginia. I think a lot of fans are sitting here going, oh, yeah, well, we'll see what happens at Florida State. And after that, because they'll pull a Carolina football again and go give up 500 yards to Florida State.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's the mindset with fans right now. And again, like we've said, we can't really blame them, because again, we're saying that would be the most Carolina football thing to go give up X amount of yards at Florida State. We're not just saying that to say it. We're saying that because there is countless number of evidence to back that up, that, yeah, no one would really be that surprised if it happened. Now, I just don't understand why, when your team plays well and they win, why you're still not allowed to be happy about that. That's the part that I have a little bit of a disconnect with still. I don't really get that. But
yeah, and it's also, who's to say that what ultimately happens the next month has anything to do with whether Mac's back or not?
That's true.
I can speak with absolute confidence that there are a lot of factors at play here with how these conversations have gone on and how they might go on, and what Bubba Cunningham would be comfortable doing and not doing, for obvious reasons. For one thing, people just fire Mac. You just can't fire Mac Brown. Mm-hmm. He came back to salvage this program when it was just terrible. Larry had the flare-up year, just terrible.
Not going to fire him.
Everybody, all the Butch people. Butch never won more than 8 games, and he was cheating his ass off.
The revisionist history with Butch Davis has drove me insane.
It's just crazy. I was around. It was, trust me.
AJ, he had the same record.
You wouldn't want that back.
He had the same record 3 years in a row. He had the same record 3 years in a row with a top 15 defense one year and a top 25 or 30.
Go back and watch the clock management game of the home game against South Carolina.
Yeah.
And just tell me you want Butch Davis back, okay? I mean, my point is, Mac's the best they've had since the early Dick Crum years. It's the best they've had. I think Carolina football was a sleeping giant when Bobby Bowden kept talking about it. I think that changed a little bit when NIL came into play. So a lot of people are saying, well, Mac hasn't delivered on what he said. I say this every damn week in the show. The Carolina job changed when NIL and portal became what it is. Because before all that, Mac's racking up classes. And they were on their way. Look at his second team. Look at what they did in Miami. They got to the Orange Bowl. Okay, the third team, they didn't handle prosperity well. Then NIL portal stuff came in. So it's not the same job. It can be again. And I know that there are a lot of discussions that have taken place about how it can be, and talking with certain people about how they can be involved to elevate Carolina to where it can be fully competitive across the board in the current climate. They're working on that now. They're not quite there. And with combining the collective, that's an attempt to help football. And maybe basketball's not so happy about that, but it is what it is. Mm-hmm. You got to take care of football. Basketball will ultimately take care of itself because if nothing else, you can tell a kid, hey, look at how much money Armando and RJ earned outside of our NIL. And Elliot Cadeau getting a damn Hilton commercial his freshman year during the NCAA tournament. That thing was recorded long before the tournament. And he was, I wouldn't say struggling, but he wasn't a superstar. So basketball will take care of itself. Football needs the attention with respect to NIL. And I know that the university is a little bit more willing, should be a little bit more willing to work with getting in the program. I do know there were some 2.9 GPA kids that were not going to get accepted at one point, and there was a little battle there about that, but they got in. So there are things that the program has to battle. If you go get some guy that comes in who doesn't understand the landscape and doesn't have the clout to, moan, like Mac is prone to do. Mac asks for a lot of things. And I was told by somebody in the athletic department, if Mac asks for 10 things and he gets 7, which is 2 or 3 or 4 more than any previous coach, he's going to keep talking about the 3 he didn't get because that's the way he rolls. And so he's going to keep on that. And I think that that's interesting because if you go bring in a guy from somewhere else, he's not going to ask for 10 things. And I think that that's the quandary that some people might be dealing with right now, because you've got a guy who can win some and hasn't gotten it over the hump entirely just yet, but he is sort of delivering on a lot of things that Carolina fans said before he was hired they wanted. I remember 2017 and 2018. We just want to win 8 and beat State every once in a while. Well, Mac's kind of delivering on that. I know they lost 3 in a row to State, but what if they beat State this year and they finish 8-4? It's done exactly what people said they wanted. So I'm not defending him. To me, I'm fascinated at how a lot of fans have sort of moved the goalpost. And going back, I get the collapses. I get JMU. I get the fact that they have lost 8 games they've lost 8 games in which they were favored by double digits under Mac. And I think 6 of them they lost by double digits.
I know.
Crazy like that.
It's not good.
I'm sitting there in the press box watching JMU, and I'm thinking, while it's happening, this is a fork in the road game.
Yeah.
And the program went this way when it needed to go that way. I get it. I get it. But also, my job is to view the whole picture, and I do think there are other parts to that story.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I do. Yeah. I do too.
Mac is what, almost just under 60% winning percentage at Carolina, and all the coaches between his 2 stints are like 40%.
I know. Yeah, again, I agree. And I'm glad you said it a few minutes ago, because it's not us trying to sit here and defend Mac, because I know a lot of us, a lot of the problem, and I say that because I think there's people in the fan base who, especially on social media, who any form of positivity regarding Mac is you defending Mac Brown. It doesn't matter if it's based in fact or not. If you say something factual about, well, Mac Brown's team have done a good job at this, it's, oh, you're just defending Mac and he should be fired, all this stuff. But I think the one, kind of, chink in his armor of Mac Brown, and one of the things that I think we've talked about a lot is, we've talked a lot about how they've had these same issues kind of over and over again every season. But I also think the problem is winning solves everything. Mac hasn't done enough of that this year. Everybody can agree with that. I think the problem is there's also been, for whatever reason with this regime, this uncanny ability to do kind of the worst possible things you could do every year with the collapses and that, but also this year of giving up 70 to JMU and then losing like you did against Georgia Tech. And, there's this uncanny ability for when things go bad, they go really, really bad, and there's no ability to recover. And I think that's what frustrates fan the most. But I do agree that, and we've talked about this on podcasts, it's not as simple as, and this is what a lot of fans don't want to admit. I know this for a fact. I've argued with people about this. It's not as simple as just fire Mac Brown and everything's fixed. I personally do not. I'm not even going to say I personally believe. I know it's not as simple as that. But I think a lot of fans look at it like that, because if I got $1 for every fire Mac, clean house, restart this thing, if I got $1 for every tweet I've seen about that, I would be a rich man right now. So I do see both sides of the story. And getting back to what we're talking about this week is, if Mac wants to avoid these kind of conversations, AJ, A, you got to win football games. And B, you can't go down to Florida State against this team and give up a ton of yards and struggle to score the ball and have this, nail biter game going down to the wire. You've got to go down there. You've got to play well. You've got to continue the performance and build on the performance that they had against Virginia, because AJ, we said it in 3 things. One of our biggest takeaways was this game doesn't mean anything if Carolina goes and doesn't win next week and doesn't have a good performance and doesn't continue this going into the rest of the season. Because at the end of the day, it was win number 4 against a bad Virginia team. Congratulations. You got to continue it. You can't just have this, oh, we just flared up one time and then we came back down to the earth and we're not a very good football team, actually. That's what Mac and the regime is going to be judged on going into the rest of the season. So we'll see what kind of happens. And
for those who are still judging,
yeah,
a lot of people aren't judging anymore. That's sort of what we're talking about as well.
That's the issue too.
Two things I want to point out right here. Number one, the people who say just tear it down and rebuild it, that in the post-World War II era, it's happened twice successfully. Bill Dooley, when he was hired in the late 60s, inherited a terrible program. And then Mac Brown in the late 80s. The only 2 times where Carolina's gone out and hired a new coach who sort of wiped the slate clean and started over, and it worked. Twice. Those aren't good odds. Those aren't good odds that it will happen again. So keep that in mind. The other thing is, I'm with you about the eggs that this program has laid under Mac. The unfathomable losses that they have suffered. I know that Virginia and Georgia Tech stick with people much more than the quality wins. I get it, because I'm a fan too of a team back here, and I think about not getting hits in the postseason, and I don't think about the 162 games in a regular season, and it sours me. I get it. I totally get it. And I think one of the biggest things working against Mac right now is that when this program lays an egg, it just doesn't lay an egg. It lays a bitter
gigantic
egg, a sour egg. It lays an egg that expired months ago.
Yeah.
It's a wretched egg. It's a plug your nose and run the other way egg. That's the problem. That's what JMU was. JMU was the mother of all plug your nose and run the other way eggs that were laid in that game. That was a pathetic performance. You will not get any argument from anybody in the program. How can you score 50 points in a game and look like dog crap? And that's what they did that game. And let's also be honest here. 2 of the last 3 years, they've given up 60 plus to Sunbelt teams.
I know. It's not good.
No, it's terrible. It's awful. The 68-yard run, the 20-0 lead over Duke. I get it. Tied up with Pittsburgh on the fourth quarter. They outscored. Remember, they went, what was it? I did the numbers. They went 93 minutes of fourth quarter playing time without scoring a touchdown going back to last season. They don't close well on either side of the ball. It's not just a crappy defense. Drake wasn't scoring touchdowns. They weren't scoring touchdowns this year in the fourth quarter. They had 2 field goals against Minnesota. So I get it. And heck, they didn't score a touchdown at UVA in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I know.
They scored 1 second half offensive touchdown at UVA because one of them was Javari. So there are a ton of things to pick at, but they're also, if you're going to pick at that stuff, which I think is fine, have at it, do so with the balance of the other things too. That's what I think that's the healthy way to look at it. And that's the way I look at it. And if you read our work and you listen to all of our shows, but certainly if you read our work, you'll know that I have picked the scabs off this stuff many times. And I kept a running track of the pitiful fourth quarters. Everyone wants to focus on defense, but the offense hadn't been that great at times either. And the offense under the last 2 years wasn't as good at the end of the year as it was earlier in the year. They didn't adjust very well. Phil Longo's offenses didn't adjust very well. Chips didn't last year. This year, maybe they will because Jacoby's growing and getting better. And as Jacoby gets better each week, they have a chance to actually ascend as a team. So the whole script is different this year than it was last year and the year before. And that's why Mac believes that they will close strong. And that's why the players believe they will close strong, because they feel like that they're growing. They've already gotten through the worst part of the year. And they've gotten through Ty Lee's death, which some people say is overblown. I don't say it is overblown, having been around this stuff pretty closely the last month, because his quick demise, and when I say quick, JMU game, he was out there for the coin flip. As an
He was on
honorary
the sideline of the Duke game. Maybe he was in like on a cart kind of thing, but he was there,
3 weeks later, he's gone. And these kids gave him a chance to have a lot of perspective. That's important sometimes because life's more important than football. And the fact that they had the open date afterward gave them time to grieve, to mourn, to process, and to memorialize him. And as Max said, seeing that casket close for a lot of the kids, they really got an understanding of just how bad off he was because Tally always put a smile on everything. And I think it made them understand that all the stress and weight on football that they were feeling wasn't all that necessary, and it certainly wasn't going to help you moving forward.
Yeah.
So we saw a relieved football team. The fact that they even came up with the idea of the high school clips probably was a byproduct of everybody feeling like there was sort of a rebirth in some sense because the weight of watching Tylee die was gone. They all believe he's in a better place. He's not feeling pain anymore. And the way his mother handled it was unbelievable and gave everybody else strength and comfort. And because of all that, they feel like, you know what, we're 4-4. Randy Clements, the offensive line coach, was in a very serious danger with his health when camp started. Missed the first 8 days of camp with a new offensive line, been in and out of the hospital a few times, had to coach a game from the press box, missed another game. Corey Gaynor, who was on the team last year, is coaching the centers and guards, and he's not getting paid. So they've been able to navigate that. They've navigated going to their third quarterback, someone who was told he wasn't going to play this year, someone who showed up 22 pounds overweight because he didn't think he was going to play, and he was battling his own thoughts. And now here they are, 8 games in the season. They're 4-4, which isn't wretched. It's kind of an ugly 4-4 given how they got in there, but they're still 4-4, and they have 4 very winnable games left to play. I think they feel like they have come through a series of tidal waves, and they're on the other side now, and they can see some light, and they believe that they are ready to tackle these last 4 games. I was fascinated that the players were talking about winning out, which is kind of typical Carolina in some ways because Carolina football has a tendency of overblowing itself.
Yeah, I don't think there's really a need to say it, but
I don't either.
Go ahead.
But I can understand where it's coming from because I think a lot of it is they feel really liberated in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So they're super optimistic right now. I get that. Now, North Carolina football must take it one game at a time because we've seen them overlook Georgia Tech. They clearly overlooked Virginia last year. I asked questions yesterday about overlooking Florida State, and I said, does it help that their name's Florida State, that they have a spear on the helmet, and they're playing in Doak Campbell, and Chief Osceola on Renegade is going to throw the burning spear in the ground? It's still Florida State. And I think that helps because I covered some really bad Carolina basketball teams, and I saw programs come in that usually didn't win in the Dean Dome, and they were just as excited beating a bad Carolina team in that building as they would have if they would have beaten a top 10 Carolina team. So that there is that element. I think Carolina is less likely to have that major hiccup overlooking FSU because it is FSU.
Yeah.
And also because FSU just is a rotten football team. But still, it would be like North Carolina to go down there and lay one big giant egg.
Yeah. And that's what we're gonna talk about now, because I think one of the problems maybe with the Mac Brown 2.0 era is I always say this and joke with this with fans, but they've struggled mightily at times to not deal with adversity necessarily, but to deal with prosperity. So when things are going right, when things go right, AJ, they fall off the rails, and there's no need for it. Just go with the collapses in this year. Now, my question is, I like what I like the confidence. I like the galvanized that the team feels like. I like the reset that they were kind of able to hit. But I just keep going back to what we talked about in 3 things last week, AJ, is none of it matters if you go lose to Florida State this week. None of it. So
it's just a blip.
It's a blip, and that's all it'll be. And again, then we'll be having a completely different conversation this time next week if that happens. So let's dive in.
If they do lose this game,
the
anti-Mac crowd, cool. I'll tell them, just say what you got to say.
Yeah.
Because there's no excuse to lose this game.
I'll stop talking about that. Yeah. I'll be like, what?
There's no excuse to lose this game. If they lose this game, then I'm not going to bother with all the stuff I said before. And I'm not saying Mac should be fired. I'm not in that position yet where I feel like I need to say that or say he should come back. Mm-hmm. But if they go down and lose this game, and if Florida State get like 430 yards, they haven't had more than 293 yards in a game. if they get 430, 450 yards, and Brock Glenn or whoever's playing quarterback looks good, they just,
Yeah, that's tough.
That's like poking massive holes in your own ship.
Yeah, and then we're gonna win out conversations like, oh, that lasted a week.
I'll sitting in the press box with Doak Campbell, ripping them with my column and stuff.
Yeah. So. You're not gonna be on the column. Won't be defending the program. Trust me about that.
If they want to validate Virginia, they have to do it in Tallahassee. It wasn't Charlottesville where they validated that game. They have to validate it this week.
Absolutely.
Then go into the next open date, winning 2 straight on the road, having a winning record. And then you look at the last 3 and say, you know what? We didn't lay an egg when we have many times before. By the way, we're 1-0 in November, which doesn't happen very often in this program. And then they've got 3 very winnable ones left. So I have no idea. I mean, my first inclination in the press box in Charlottesville, talking with Adam and some of the others, they're going to lose in Tallahassee. That was my first inclination.
That's the problem, right?
But then I started digging into Florida State. I'm like, holy crap, they're terrible.
Yeah.
Outside of Dan Mastromano, the punter, the number 1 in the country, they suck in every conceivable way.
I know. It's amazing. And let's dive into the Florida State preview because that's a perfect segue. I'm going to let you talk about the defense. I'm going to talk about the offense. And this is going to be a little bit different from the kind of overview of the opponents that we typically do. I'm not going to dive into, this is where they rank in ACC defense. I'm going to do some more national stuff on the offensive side, or you got to watch out for this guy. People know how bad Florida State
just read the numbers, man, because
it's mind-boggling.
And I'll tell everybody, process the numbers that Jacob reads.
Yeah.
Because it's alarming. It's alarming to think this group was 13-0 a year ago. And rightfully, we're defended by so many people for not getting into the playoff. Mm-hmm. Of course, the commissioner of the ACC didn't bother. But that's another. And then, of course, karma. We're not going to get into the lawsuit stuff, but it is kind of funny that karma's kicking them right into you-know-what.
Oh, it's kicking them hard, man. Because
this league's not good enough for us, but the league's kicking their butt. The one game that they've won in the league, the only game they've won at all, is Cal. Mm-hmm. And former Carolina kicker Ryan Coe missed 2 chippies. Otherwise, they would have lost that game.
I know. It's amazing.
And this is their last ACC game, by the way. Their ACC season's done. Yeah,
they're 1-6 in league play. They've already played 7 ACC games.
They've got Notre Dame, Charleston Southern, and Florida left.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, they'll be lucky they should beat Charleston Southern. Keyword should there.
Will they get 300 yards against Charleston Southern?
Yeah. let me dive in. This
by the way, Charleston Southern, I drove by their stadium
a couple years ago
when I went down to cover Carolina at College of Charleston in basketball. Their stadium is smaller than Scotland High Schools down in Scotland.
Wow. I think their basketball gym is too, because I have seen pictures of a gym before. it ain't much.
I heard that they played outside. They just raised a bunch of glad bags to put over, and anyway.
Oh, that's fantastic. But I'm going to go ahead and read off some offensive stats. You're going to focus more on the defense, and this was something that was actually tweeted out a few days ago by warchant.com, which is a really good outlet that covers FSU. But this is a graphic that really just illustrates how bad they've been. Now, these are comparisons to 133. There's 133 FBS teams, if I can get that out. I'm going to read where FSU currently ranks in a lot of categories. Scoring offense, AJ, 132 out of 133. Total offense, 131 out of 133. Third down offense, 131 out of 133. Rushing offense, 130 out of 133. Passing offense is actually what they're the best in out of any of these, and it's 101 out of 133. I mean,
but look at pass efficiency.
Yeah, it is.
What are they at pass efficiency? Is that there?
Pass efficiency is, let's see if I can find it. I had it pulled up here a second ago. We got pass efficiency.
The passing is just raw numbers.
130.
Yeah, pass efficiency. I look more at pass efficiency, offense, and pass efficiency defense than I do the yards. Mm-hmm. Like Carolina gave up 281 passing yards to UVA, but that's fine because they gave up 7 rushing. But the pass efficiency numbers were a lot lower. So pass efficiency is far more important to me, and Florida State sucks there too.
Yeah, 129 in first downs accumulated, 110 in sacks allowed, 113 in TFLs allowed. There is absolutely nothing you can look at the only thing they are somewhat decent is they're number 50 in red zone offense. That's the only stat listed here.
They don't get there that often.
100. Yeah.
And they don't get there that often. So it's sort of a moot point.
Exactly. And that's kind of the outlier here and why it's an outlier. But the main takeaway is we know how bad FSU's been. As someone who, I don't watch FSU every week. I don't follow them. I could care less about how FSU does, really. But when you dive into these numbers, there is absolutely nothing here. AJ, it stinks. Flat out stinks. It's bad. Horrible. Now, we have to have this conversation, AJ. I think like we've talked about, the problem is Carolina, you're looking at all this and you're saying, if you're Carolina, you simply cannot, I could say sit here and say cannot for another 30 minutes, go down there and let FSU have this get right game out of nowhere that they just have not had this year, because they haven't. And I again, whether that happens or not, TBD. But FSU offensively is horrendous, and there's no reason Carolina should be able to go down there and dominate them on defense, particularly when you look at what they were able to do against Virginia last week. So talk to me a little bit about the FSU defense, and then we'll kind of bring it all back together afterwards.
All right, I'm going to do what you did. I'm going to read some of these defense.
Yeah, read some stats.
And I'm going to scare the living crap out of people by putting my reading glasses on right now, because otherwise it'll just be gibberish. Okay, so here's some things that are alarming. They're last in the nation. They've given up more plays at 10 yards or more than anybody in the country. They're number 126 in giving up the most plays 20 yards or more. They're number 105 giving up plays 30 yards or more. They're number 112 giving up plays 40 yards or more. They're 80th in total defense. They're number 105 in rushing defense. They're number 40 in passing yards allowed, but they're number 82 in pass efficiency defense. They're number 107 in third down defense. Number 41 in red zone defense, which is pretty good. Number 113 in first downs allowed. Now, the two things they do pretty well defensively is they average almost 3 sacks a game, and they average 6.5 TFLs a game.
So they get to the quarterback.
So that speaks to Chip and Mac were talking about their front line defensively. It speaks to how athletic they are. They can make plays. They've got good players, but there's also a lot of breakdowns. Mm-hmm. So they stink on both sides of the ball. They're one of the worst teams in the country in penalties and penalty yards. They have the best punter in college football. He's got a lot of work this year. And, this is a football team North Carolina should beat. But let's remember, Carolina had a 5 next to their name when they went down there in 2020. Yeah. And it blew up in their face right away. Their first possession, a punt blocked. The next play, Jordan Travis era began, and he ran 23 yards untouched for a touchdown. I mean, that was Jordan Travis's breakthrough game. Mm-hmm. And it was 24. It was 31-7 at the half. And that was a winless FSU team.
Yeah.
And so Carolina, by the way, Mac's never beaten FSU ever. He played there, never beaten them. 3 years ago, after Bobby Bowden passed, FSU came in Chapel Hill. Carolina had no business losing that game, and Travis ran roughshod all over him. Tar Heels lost. Mm-hmm. It was on a silver platter. Take care of FSU. That Carolina team could not do it. Mm-hmm. The year before they go down there, it's national TV. It's ABC primetime. Number 5 Carolina. They're positioning themselves to have a special season. Where have we seen this before? And they get blown up. Now, they did come back. It was 31-28, and Javonte dropped a pass. Yeah. That would have put them in position to possibly tie or win the game at the end of regulation. But they put themselves so far behind that they couldn't overcome it. And they had 2 punts blocked in that game. But it seems like that's a common theme in all bad games for North Carolina. And they should have won that game. So they had actually won 2 in a row in Tallahassee in 2010. And then I covered the game in 2016 when Nick Weiler kicked the field goal and they ran off the field doing the tomahawk chop. But Mac hadn't been able to beat him. Mac needs to beat him this weekend.
Oh, yeah.
So if they don't win this game, then I'm going to stand back and just let all the Mac, the anti-Mac brigade just have their fun.
Yeah, they won't
win this game. Florida State's a terrible football team. It doesn't matter what's on their helmet to me because they're a terrible football team. And if North Carolina is ascending, which everybody in the program insists that they are, then to me, this should be no contest. Carolina should win by a couple touchdowns or more. They should be in control early. This should be one of those games maybe where Omarion gets a ton of carries. We talked to Omarion yesterday, and I asked him about all of his touches and about how it's different this year recovering from a game as opposed to last year. And he says it takes till Wednesday or Thursday when he's fully recovered. And I brought up Mike Voigt, the great Mike Voigt in the 1970s, back-to-back ACC Player of the Year. He had 47 carries in a win over Duke one year. And I asked him, Mario, could you carry it 47 times? How many times could you carry it? It was a legitimate question. He said he would carry it as much as he has to, as long as he knows that he may end up carrying it a ton, he'll be fine doing it. Mm-hmm. This might be a game where Omarion carries it 30, 35 times, and you got to do it to get a win.
Yeah.
Because if he's getting 5, 6, 7, 8 a pop, you throw it every once in a while, but just ride him, man. Ride him.
That for me is the game plan. I mean, going into Tallahassee, and I think we saw a little bit of that against Virginia. I mean, Omarion Hampton was crucial to what Carolina was able to do in the first half when it was a tighter game. They kind of established the run and established that physicality and established what they were trying to do on offense through him, and that led to some big pass plays and other things happening. I think you do the same thing here. You look at how bad you just listed, number 105 in rush defense, 180 yards per game. If I'm Omarion Hampton and I'm Chip Lindsey, I'm looking and licking my lips and saying, the goal going into this game in the first and second quarter, we're going to run it down Florida State's throat and see if they respond, because AJ, they haven't responded this year. They're 1-7. They're 1-6 in league play. This team is bad. They've shown that we are not able to deal with adversity in a game. We are not able to stop offenses. There is no need for you to go on the first possession and throw the ball 3 times. Go
and have Jacoby get picked. Jacoby hasn't thrown a pick since the Duke game. So he'll go the entire month of October without throwing a pick, which is he's making better and better decisions. But I agree with you 1,000%. You got to go with your strength. When you're going to North Carolina, has to learn how to guard against being upset. And you do so not by playing not to lose. You do so by playing to win and by going with your strength. And to me, the strength in this game is Omarion, shove it down their throats. And if you can establish that early, Florida State, because of their how fragile they are psychologically, they're gonna. I wouldn't say they're gonna wilt. I don't think that would be fair. But if Carolina is running the ball and you can't stop that, you kind of feel helpless as a defense.
Yeah. Oh, no doubt.
If Jacoby doesn't need to throw the ball but 15 times this game, then don't throw it. Just throw it 15 times, if even that. Roll with it. And Davion Goss, by the way, is coming along nicely, and he can spell Omarion quite well. Mm-hmm. He can catch and he can run. So you've got enough there. I think the game plan needs to be going there and just pound it.
Agreed. I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more on that. I picked Carolina to win by 34-17. I'm pretty confident they go down there and take care of business. But again, like we've said, I think the issue is, would I be surprised if they went down there and laid an egg? No. And I think that's kind of the problem we've talked about in this podcast a lot. I
think I have 28-10.
That's a good score. Yeah.
Not sure. I'm not sure if that's what I have, but I think that's what I have. I initially thought Carolina was going to go down there and lose. I was on the record in the press box at UVA saying that. And then the next day when we had basketball in the press room at the Tino, we were talking about this again. I'm like, they're going to lose. They're going to do what they've done so many times because it's part of the program's DNA under Mac, which is, again, I'm not defending Mac earlier. I'm not being anti-Mac here. It's just a reality that's true. It is part of the DNA that they lay those damn eggs. However, when I started peeling the layers away on FSU, I knew they were bad, but they are historically bad.
Horrendous.
And if North Carolina doesn't win this game, they go down there and lose, especially if they lose in a non-fluke kind of way, if they just get beaten. It's going to be really hard for people to recover from that.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be another low point in what a season that's already had quite a few low points. Hopefully, if you're a Carolina fan, we don't have to have that conversance. But AJ,
I'll be there, and I love covering games there. I get to see the great Chuck Walsh, who's the basketball media relations guy.
Nice. Yeah.
I've known him since I first started when he used to be at Maryland, so it's always great to see him. It's always fun to cover games down there. Tallahassee's not the greatest place on earth, but the campus is great, and around the area around the stadium is. And if you're a Carolina fan going, you haven't been there before, there's so much to do. And make sure you're in there kind of early. You want to be in there and settle and kind of soak it in, and you've got to see Chief Osceola on Renegade before the game. That's all. That's one of the ACC's got some great pregame moments. It's kind of underrated. This one is phenomenal. People know about it. Clemson running down the hill, Enter Sandman, Georgia Tech coming out on the Ramblin' Wreck is phenomenal. There's some great ones in this league. But as much as I get goosebumps watching Clemson run down the hill, the Chief Osceola slam and stare, man, that's top-notch stuff.
Yeah.
It's still Florida State, and it's still Chief Osceola.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. It's still a program that has a lot of history in football. Couple subscriber questions real quick we're going to dive into, then we'll get out of here. Got one from GD44. Again, if you want to get involved in these, we post a thread every Monday on our website, TarHeelIllustrated.com, in the premium message boards. You have to be a premium subscriber to be able to ask these questions. $8.33 a month. Go and sign up. This is actually a pretty low perk you get compared to all the other perks and insider information you get. But this is something we try to do for our subscribers because of them obviously putting their hard-earned money into what we do and helping support that. Essentially, I'm going to summarize his question. He said Heels are 4-4 with 4 games remaining. He wants us to give a percentage chance that we think Carolina finishes the season bowl eligible. I'll let you go first. What percentage chance do you give Carolina that they get 6 or more wins?
I would be shocked if they don't, because the remaining 4, as much as I think individually, if you partition out each game, I could see them winning each game, although BC would be the least likely.
Yeah.
I don't see them winning all 4 because they've done nothing to give anybody the true belief that they can do that. They might believe that in that building, and that's great. You want them to believe that. Of
course, yeah.
I think winning this weekend, beating Wake, or winning this weekend, beating State, I think they're gonna finish 7-5.
Okay.
I think they win this weekend. I think they beat Wake. I think they beat State. I think they lose to BC. So they're going to be. I think they're going to be bowl eligible. The question is, if they're 6-6, what do you do with that bowl eligibility? What is the value in going through the motions to play a bowl game if there is a change? If there is a change and a new coach comes in, he's got to do whatever he can to hold together a small recruiting class and deal with the portal. And he's going to do that while someone else prepares them for a bowl game. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, we'll have to cross that bridge when we get there, but 6-6 is not ideal because I think it complicates things a lot.
Yeah.
7-5 and 8-4 might not complicate things as much. Mm-hmm. Certainly 4-8 won't at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I give Carolina, if I had to throw a percent on it, I'd give them an 85% chance of being
I'd say, yeah, I would be really surprised if they didn't, but I guess I wouldn't say I'd be stunned because I've already seen a lot of things that have numbed me to the idea of being stunned about this football program.
That is a fact, especially as long as you've been covering this program. One more question here, AJ. This is from, where is it? Tar Heel 0910. Interesting question. I don't know if this is one we can really accurately answer because of the bye week and other things going into it, but he's essentially asking, how low do you think the confidence level was among the players during the losing streak, and how much did the win against UVA potentially shift that confidence level?
I think the win against UVA kind of validated their restart during the open period. Mm-hmm. So I think I'm not saying they lost faith in coaches, but when the coaches say, okay, you're going to do this, this, and this, and you go out and do it and it works, you have a lot of faith in your coaches. They came out ready to play in those games. I thought that one of the most impressive things this season was the week after James Madison, they went up 20-0 at Duke and they were dominating. Yeah. And I've said all along, Mac has not lost his team at all. People say sometimes on Twitter, Mac's lost the team. No, he hasn't. No. They're up 20-0 midway through the third quarter at Duke. A team a coach that's lost his team doesn't do that. The following week, after giving up that big 21 unanswered points and losing, they're tied with Pitt, who's still unbeaten in the fourth quarter. Clearly, he didn't lose them that week. A week later, they find a way to score a touchdown to tie Georgia Tech inside the last minute. If he had lost the team, they would not have been in that situation. I think the team has been confident on a weekly basis. I think the staff does a good job of building them up. I think they do a good job of having them believe in the game plan. I think the problem is that when things start to go poorly, they have a tough time regrouping. It's like they're running in mud and they're slipping and they can't find dry ground for a little bit of time. And while they're doing that, a lot of damage is done. Mm-hmm. So Now I think they feel really good. I mean, they're saying they're going to run the table, so that's pretty damn confident.
Yeah, I would say so.
I do think, and I probably should have talked about this more, but Mac hasn't lost his team.
No.
And that's a credit to him. And I'll tell you, the kids truly believe in him. And they know the stuff that's said about him, and it bothers them a lot, but it's said about them as individuals. It's said all kinds of different things are said. So they're not going to focus on everything. It's sort of a kind of a plume of negativity, and they view it all sort of as one thing. So we'll see what happens these next 4 games. We'll see what happens these next 4 games and then afterward or during the open date next week or whatever. There's going to be some more interesting things that happen around this program in the next month.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah,
and the answer to that question kind of plays into what those interesting things that will happen kind of reflect.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Last one from Ty Heel. I'm reading this out because we've already answered it in this, but I'll just read it out to give him a shout out for throwing one in. Now that it's been a few days since the UVA game, how is the vibe in the locker room and approach of the next game at FSU? And again, we've talked about it. It's what they're saying. They're saying they're going to win out. I think that's the vibe and that's the mood around the program right now going into this next FSU game. I think we talked about being galvanized a little bit by the bye week and Ty Lee and all that stuff. So I think for a 4-4 team and for a team that's lost the games, JMU and the way they lost to Duke and Georgia Tech, for a team that's lost games the way they have this year, I think this team's feeling pretty good compared to what some other 4-4 teams might be feeling around the country right now. So I
felt over in the Keenan Football Center Monday and Tuesday, I felt like I was in the building of a team that's like 6-2.
Yeah,
not 4-4. And the win in UVA and the way they did it was so important for these kids because they were finding ways to lose.
I know.
And there they took care of business and actually closed the first half strong. I mean, if you span the 2 halves, the end of the first half, begin the second half, they scored 3 touchdowns in 4 minutes and 32 minutes of football. 4 minutes and 32 seconds of football. That's like a complete shift in what we've seen.
Mm-hmm.
So they did enough right. They had enough fun. They're going to feel really good about themselves. But as you said earlier, and you're 1,000,000,000% spot on, this program has not shown an ability to handle prosperity at all. The one time they handled prosperity, well, I'm not even sure they did, but when they beat Miami in 2020, when they throttled them, they were ahead of Texas A&M in the fourth quarter in that game, in the Orange Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Minus some of those guys that throttled Miami. So maybe that was the one group that could handle it, but they have not handled it well. So
got to prove it.
We'll see. I mean, you can only pat yourself on the back so much. You got to get back to work and prepare. I have the impression that they have gone back to work and they're preparing well this week, but there was a lot of patting on the back, no doubt about it. And if there was too much of it, we will see on the field at Doak Campbell Stadium for sure.
Yeah, no, it'll be hard to hide the fact if Carolina goes down there and has a bad performance. Yeah, we'll be having a different conversation next time we hop on a podcast. But AJ, we'll see what happens this Saturday, guys. We're going to go ahead and get out of here. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Another edition of the UNC Football Show. Like the video below if you think Carolina's going to go down to Tallahassee and win this Saturday. I expect a good amount of likes on this one. I think people should be confident in a win down there. But again, like we said, I don't think anybody would be shocked if Carolina goes down there and has a poor performance and loses. But we'll see what happens on Saturday afternoon. 3:30 kick. Carolina currently a 2.5-point favorite over the 1-7 Seminoles. Make sure you like the video. Make sure you subscribe. Hit the notification bell too. Appreciate you guys watching. As always, keep it locked to TarLillustrated.com for all your coverage of Carolina football, basketball, and recruiting. $8.33 a month to sign up. Again, like I mentioned earlier, one of the perks of doing it, you get to ask us subscriber questions that we'll tackle on the UNC Football Show, among many, many other things that I could sit here for an hour and talk to you about. So link in the description below. Go on over and sign up. Appreciate you guys watching. See y'all next time. Thanks.